All right, so get ready for another deep dive. We take your sources, right, and turn them into like a knowledge treasure map for you to like get straight to all the good stuff. I'm Mark Buzz,
And I'm Anna Bugs.
and we are diving headfirst into a topic that might send shivers down your spine, rats in the walls. Specifically, we're going to be going over an article from Simple Pest Management on how to evict these unwelcome tenants. And let me tell you, I learned a thing or two
Oh, for sure.
that I was not expecting.
Yeah, it's an issue that's a lot more common than you might think, and I think people are really embarrassed to admit that they have rats.
Right.
But it can really happen to anyone.
That's right. And the thing is, ignoring it won't make it go away.
Right.
It can actually make things a whole lot worse.
Definitely.
The article jumps right into the dangers, basically saying that rats aren't just creepy crawlies. They're a real threat to your safety and well-being.
Absolutely. They can cause a lot of damage. Their gnawing habits can lead to fire hazards because they chew through electrical wiring, and not to mention the damage they can do to insulation, drywall, even structural elements of your home.
It's like living with a tiny demolition crew that never clock out.
Yeah.
And then there's the health aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I always knew rats were associated with disease, but the article really drives home the risks.
Yeah, and it's not even just about direct contact. Either their droppings can contaminate surfaces and spread bacteria like salmonella, and their urine can carry leptospirosis, which can lead to serious health complications.
So it's not just about the ick factor, it's about protecting your health and the health of your family.
Right.
So before we start picturing hordes of rats just like running rampant through our house,
Yeah.
let's talk about early detection.
Okay.
What are some of the signs that these furry intruders have taken up residence in your walls?
Well, droppings are a surefire sign. You'll typically find these small, dark pellets near their nesting areas or along their travel routes.
Okay, so those are kind of hard to miss.
Right.
What about more subtle clues?
Well, listen carefully. Rats are most active at night, so pay attention to any unusual sounds like scratching, gnawing, squeaking coming from your walls or ceiling. That's a sign that they might be building their little rat metropolis in there.
Oh, that's enough to make anyone want to sleep with earplugs.
Right.
The article also mentions checking for gnaw marks. What exactly should we be looking for?
Keep an eye out for teeth marks on wood, wires, insulation, even stored items. Rats have really strong teeth, constantly gnawing to keep them trimmed. So if you see signs of their, dental work, it's time to take action.
So let's say you found some droppings, heard some suspicious sounds, maybe even spotted some gnaw marks. What's the first step to evicting these freeloaders?
Okay, well, the article outlines a 6-step plan, and the first step is crucial: sealing up all potential entry points.
Okay, so that makes sense. You got to cut off their access before you can even think about getting rid of them. But how do you even begin to find all those tiny holes? I mean, these guys are like Houdinis. They can squeeze through the tiniest of spaces.
Yeah, and that's where that detail about their flexible skeletons really clicks. Knowing they can fit through a hole the size of a quarter helps you prioritize
Yeah.
which gaps really need sealing. So a thorough inspection is key, focusing on your foundation, walls, roof, any areas where pipes and vents enter your home.
So it's like putting on your detective hat and really scrutinizing every nick and cranny.
Exactly.
And what about sealing those entry points? What kind of materials will actually stand up to those sharp little teeth?
Steel wool is a great option. Rats really hate chewing on it, and it's surprisingly effective at plugging those small gaps. For larger holes, you might need to use a combination of materials like wire mesh, caulk, or even concrete patching.
It sounds like we're building Fort Knox for rodents.
Basically, yeah, you want to make it as difficult as possible for them to gain entry. And don't forget about the landscaping. Trim back any overhanging branches or shrubs that could provide a pathway to your roof.
Oh, so we're cutting off their air support. Makes sense.
Yep.
So we've sealed up the fortress. What's the next step in our rat-busting operation?
Trapping is a classic and often effective method, but there are a few different approaches to consider.
Okay, so we're talking about those good old-fashioned snap traps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those always seem to be the go-to in, like, movies and cartoons.
Yeah, those are definitely effective and they're readily available. But the article also mentions glue traps and live traps as options.
Live traps, so you catch them and then what, you just release them into the wild? Isn't that just shifting the problem somewhere else?
Well, it kind of depends on your perspective and the extent of the infestation. Some people prefer a more humane approach, especially if they're just dealing with a few rats.
Right.
But for a widespread infestation, live traps might not be the most practical solution.
I guess I can see that, but for a real rat invasion, it seems like snap traps are the most straightforward solution.
Yeah.
But then there's the question of bait.
Uh-huh.
What are these little guys most attracted to?
Peanut butter is a classic choice. It's sticky, aromatic, and rats just can't resist it.
Right.
But the article also suggests chocolate, dried fruit, or even bacons as effective alternatives.
So it's like crafting a gourmet menu for our unwelcome guests.
Right.
The key is to make it so tempting they can't resist.
Right.
But what about placing those traps? Is it a matter of just like scattering them around randomly?
Not quite. You want to be strategic place traps along walls, near entry points, or in areas where you've seen droppings or gnaw marks. Basically, anywhere you suspect rat activity.
So it's about thinking like a rat, anticipating their movements, and setting up ambushes in their likely paths.
Exactly. And speaking of anticipating their needs, let's move on to the next step in the article's plan. Removing food and water sources.
That makes perfect sense. If they can't find anything to eat or drink, they'll be less likely to stick around, right?
Absolutely, and this is where your detective work comes in again. You need to identify any potential food sources that might be attracting rats to your home.
So what are we talking about here? Crumbs on the floor, forgotten leftovers in the fridge?
Those are definitely culprits, but think bigger. Are there any pet feed bowls left out overnight? Is your garbage properly secured?
Right.
Are there any leaky faucets or dripping pipe that might be providing a water source?
It's like we're cutting off their lifeline,
Yeah,
depriving them of the essentials they need to survive.
precisely. And don't forget about the yard. Remove any fallen fruit from trees. Keep bird feeders clean and elevated. Make sure your compost bin is securely sealed.
So it's a whole house approach, both inside and out.
Mm-hmm.
We're basically making our homes as inhospitable to rats as possible.
Exactly. You want to create an environment where they can't thrive.
All right, we've sealed up entry points, set our traps, and eliminated food and water sources. What else can we do to send these furry little intruders packing?
The article mentions using deterrents and repellents as an additional layer of defense. These can be especially helpful in areas where traps might not be feasible or safe, like near children or pets.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of deterrents are we talking about? Are we going full-on Ghostbusters with sonic blasters?
Not quite. There are some high-tech options like ultrasonic devices that emit high-frequency sounds that are supposed to be irritating to rats, but the effectiveness of those is debated.
So what about more natural approaches?
The article suggests using natural repellents like peppermint oil, which rats apparently find offensive. You can soak cotton balls in peppermint oil and place them near entry points or in areas where you've seen rat activity.
So we're not just rat-proofing our homes, we're making them smell minty fresh.
Yeah.
I like it. What about those commercial rat poisons? Are those a safe and effective option?
The article advises using rat poisons as a last resort and with extreme caution. They can be dangerous to pets and children if not handled properly. And there's always the risk of rats dying in inaccessible areas, leading to unpleasant odors.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'd rather avoid having a decomposing rat surprise somewhere in my walls.
Right.
So what's the alternative if DIY methods aren't cutting it?
Well, the article makes a strong case for calling in the professionals, especially for severe or persistent infestations.
All right, let's talk about the pros. What exactly does a professional exterminator bring to the table that we can't do ourselves?
Well, they have the knowledge, experience, and specialized tools to tackle even the most challenging infestations. They'll start with a thorough inspection to identify entry points, nesting sites, and the extent of the problem.
It's like they're rat detectives,
Mm-hmm.
uncovering the clues and piecing together the puzzle.
Exactly. They'll then develop a customized treatment plan, which might include setting bait stations, traps, and using professional-grade rodenticides.
So it's a multi-pronged attack, targeting the rats from all angles.
Right, and because they're trained in safe handling and application techniques, they can minimize the risks associated with rodenticides, ensuring the safety of your family and pets.
So it's about peace of mind, knowing that the problem's being handled effectively and safely.
Absolutely. Professionals can also provide valuable advice on prevention, helping you to rat-proof your home and avoid future infestation.
So it's not just about getting rid of the current problem, it's about preventing it from happening again.
Precisely. Professionals take a long-term approach, ensuring that your home remains rodent-free for the long haul.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but
Yeah.
let's take a quick breather before diving into the next part of our deep dive.
All right.
We've talked about the dangers of rats,
Right.
the importance of early detection,
Mm-hmm.
and the steps you can take to get rid of them.
Uh-huh.
We've explored DIY methods like sealing entry points, setting traps, and removing food and water sources.
Right.
And we've touched on the benefits of professional extermination for more challenging cases.
Yep.
We've even learned a few tricks about using natural repellents like peppermint oil to make our homes less appealing to these furry little invaders.
Yeah.
But our exploration isn't over yet. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll dump into the fascinating world of rat behavior,
Okay.
uncovering the secrets behind their intelligence,
Uh-huh.
adaptability, and uncanny ability to survive and
It's
thrive.
pretty amazing.
We'll also explore the potential health risks associated with rats in more detail,
Right.
discussing the diseases they can carry and how to minimize the risk of transmission.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll wrap up with some final thoughts on prevention, offering some additional tips and tricks to keep those rats far, far away from your home sweet home.
Sounds good.
So if you're enjoying this rodent-filled adventure so far, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the Deep Dive for more fascinating deep dives into a wide range of topics. And for more expert advice on pest control, follow Simple Pest Management on social media. They've got a wealth of information to help you keep those pesky critters at bay. We'll be right back after a short break.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We've laid the groundwork for understanding the threat of rats in your walls, but now we're going to kind of shift gears a bit. Yeah, to effectively combat any enemy, you need to understand their tactics, right?
Right.
So let's delve into the fascinating, albeit slightly unsettling, world of rat behavior.
Okay, I'm ready to put on my rat whisperer hat, or maybe it's more like a rat detective hat in this case.
Either works.
Yeah,
Now, remember how we talked about those flexible skeletons? Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to their remarkable adaptability.
right.
These creatures have evolved to thrive in incredibly diverse environments,
Yeah.
from sewers to attics to, yes, even the cozy confines of our walls.
It's true, they seem to pop up in the most unexpected places.
Yeah.
It's almost like they have a sixth sense for finding vulnerabilities in our homes.
Well, they do have highly developed senses, particularly their sense of smell and touch. They use their whiskers to navigate in the dark and detect vibrations,
Oh, wow.
making them incredibly adept at squeezing through tight spaces and finding their way around.
So it's not just luck that they manage to find those tiny entry points.
Right.
They're actively seeking them out, using their senses to explore and exploit any weakness they can find.
Exactly. And their intelligence plays a crucial role in their success.
Right.
They're quick learners, able to solve problems, adapt to changing environments. In fact, studies have shown that they can even outsmart some traps,
Wow.
which is why it's so important to use effective trap-in methods and to be strategic about placement.
Wow, that's both impressive and a little bit intimidating.
Yeah,
It's like we're dealing with tiny masterminds.
in a way, yes, they're constantly assessing their surroundings, looking for food, water, and shelter.
Right.
And they're incredibly resourceful when it comes to finding what they need. For example, did you know that they can climb almost any vertical surface?
Oh, yeah. I've heard stories about rats scaling brick walls and even navigating pipes with ease.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like they have superpowers.
Well, they do have incredibly strong legs and sharp claws that give them a remarkable grip, and their ability to jump is astonishing. They can leap several feet horizontally and vertically, which explains how they manage to access seemingly impossible locations.
So basically, there's no escape from these agile acrobats.
Pretty much.
They can climb, jump, squeeze, and even outsmart us.
Yeah.
Like we're playing a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, and the mouse has a few tricks up its sleeve.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of tricks, let's talk about their social behavior.
Okay.
Rats are highly social creatures living in colonies with complex hierarchies and communication systems.
So it's not just a few lone wolves sneaking around.
Right.
We're talking about organized communities
Yes.
with their own rules and social structures.
Exactly. They communicate through a variety of vocalizations, including ultrasonic sounds that are beyond our hearing range.
Wow.
And they use scent markings to establish territories and signal danger.
So it's like they have their own secret language,
Mm-hmm.
a whole world of communication that we're only just beginning to understand.
And that's what makes them so fascinating.
Right.
They're complex creatures with remarkable abilities and adaptations that have allowed them to survive and thrive alongside humans for centuries.
You know, hearing all this about their intelligence and social behavior makes me almost feel a bit sorry for them.
Yeah,
But then I remembered the potential health risks,
right.
and that sympathy quickly fades away.
That's understandable. It's important to remember that while they may be fascinating creatures,
Right.
they can also pose serious threats to our health. We touched on this earlier, but let's delve a bit deeper into the specific diseases they can carry.
Okay, so besides the ick factor, what are the real dangers we need to be aware of?
Well, one of the most significant risks is leptospirosis, a bacterial infection that can be spread through contact with rat urine.
Okay.
The bacteria can enter your body through cuts or abrasions, or even through mucous membrane, like your eyes or nose.
That sounds pretty nasty. What are the symptoms?
They can range from mild flu-like symptoms to more serious complications like kidney damage, meningitis, and even liver failure.
Oh, wow.
And the scary thing is that leptospirosis can be difficult to diagnose because its symptoms often mimic other illnesses.
So it's not something to be taken lightly. What about other diseases?
Rats can also carry salmonellosis, a bacterial infection that causes food poisoning,
Right?
and they can transmit hantavirus, a potentially deadly respiratory illness.
Wow, that's a pretty serious list of potential health hazards.
Yeah,
So definitely not something you want to mess around with.
absolutely. And the risk of disease transmission isn't limited to direct contact with rats. Their droppings can contaminate food and surfaces,
Right.
and their urine can seep into water sources,
Wrong.
making it essential to maintain good sanitation and hygiene practices.
So it's not just about keeping rats out of our homes. It's about minimizing the risk of exposure to the diseases they carry.
Right. It's a multifaceted approach that involves prevention, control, and awareness. Now, speaking of prevention, let's shift gears again and talk about some additional steps you can take to make your home less attractive to these unwanted guests.
Okay, I'm ready for round 2 of our rat-proofing strategy session.
Okay.
We've already covered the basics, like sealing entry points, removing food and water sources, and being strategic with traps.
Right.
What else can we add to our arsenal?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, rats have a highly developed sense of smell.
Right.
And there are certain scents they find repulsive.
Mm-hmm.
Peppermint oil is a classic example. You can soak cotton balls in peppermint oil and place them near entry points or in areas where you've seen rat activity.
So it's like creating a force field of minty freshness that rats can't stand to cross.
Exactly. And there are other natural repellents you can try, like cloves, cayenne pepper, and even used coffee grounds.
Oh, okay.
Rats also tend to avoid areas with strong ammonia scents.
Oh, interesting.
So placing a small dish of ammonia-soaked rags near entry points can be a deterrent.
Now, just be sure to use caution with ammonia, as it can be harmful if inhaled or ingested. Always wear gloves and a mask when handling it, and keep it out of reach of children and pets.
Good point. Safety should always be the top priority. Now let's move outside for a moment. Remember, rats aren't limited to the confines of our homes.
Right.
They're equally happy to set up shop in our yards and gardens if we provide the right conditions.
So what are some landscaping tips to keep these furry little landscapers at bay?
Well, first and foremost, keep your yard tidy. Rats love clutter and debris, so clear away any piles of leaves, branches, or wood.
Okay.
And keep your grass trimmed short, as tall grass provides cover and makes it easier for rats to move around undetected.
So it's about creating a clean and open environment that doesn't offer much in the way of hiding places.
Exactly. And if you have any fruit trees, be sure to pick up any fallen fruit promptly. Rotting fruit is like a gourmet buffet for rats, so don't give them any reason to linger.
Makes sense. What about bird feeders? Those seem like they'd be a magnet for rats as well.
They can be, especially if they're not properly maintained. If you have bird feeders, make sure they're elevated and squirrel-proof and clean up any spilled seed regularly. You want the birds to enjoy their feast, but you don't want to create a rodent smorgasbord.
Right. It's about finding a balance between enjoying our feathered friends and not inadvertently inviting a rat invasion.
And speaking of invitations, let's talk about garbage. Make sure your garbage cans are tightly sealed and stored away from your house. Rats are expert dumpster divers, so don't make it easy for them to access your trash.
It's like we're putting up a no vacancy sign for rodents.
Exactly. And if you have a compost bin, be sure to turn it regularly and avoid adding any meat or dairy products, as those can attract rats. Composting is great for the environment, but you don't want to create a rodent breeding ground in your backyard.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in terms of prevention,
Yeah.
both inside and outside our homes.
Right.
But before we wrap up part 2 of our deep dive, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier,
Okay.
the importance of professional extermination.
Right. We've talked about DIY methods, and those can certainly be effective for minor infestations or as preventive measures.
Right.
But sometimes the problem is simply too big or too persistent for homeowners to handle on their own.
So when is it time to call in the cavalry, so to speak?
Well, if you've tried all the DIY methods
Right.
and you're still seeing signs of rat activity,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good indication that you might need professional help.
Okay.
Or if you're dealing with a large infestation,
Right.
especially one that involves multiple nesting sites,
Mm-hmm.
it's best to leave it to the experts.
What about concerns about safety? We talked about the risks associated with rodenticides,
Right.
especially if there are children or pets in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something professionals can address?
Absolutely. Professional exterminators are trained in the safe handling and application of rodenticides.
Okay.
They know how to target the treatments effectively,
Right.
minimizing the risk to non-target animals and humans.
So it's about peace of mind, knowing that the problem is being handled responsibly and effectively.
Exactly. And professionals can also provide valuable insights into the specific factors that might be contributing to the infestation in your home.
So it's not just about getting rid of the rats. It's about understanding why they're there in the first place
Mm-hmm.
and taking steps to prevent them from returning.
Precisely. Professionals take a holistic approach, addressing both the immediate problem and the underlying causes.
Well, I think that brings us to a good stopping point for part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay.
We've delved into the fascinating world of rat behavior,
Yeah,
explored the potential health risks,
right.
and discussed the benefits of professional extermination.
Uh-huh.
We've also armed you with a whole arsenal of prevention strategies, from sealing entry points and removing food sources to using natural repellents and maintaining a tidy yard.
Mm-hmm.
And we've emphasized the importance of being proactive and vigilant,
Right.
knowing that even the smallest gaps or crumbs can become an open invitation for these persistent creatures.
That's true.
But our exploration isn't over yet. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll wrap up with some additional tips and tricks for preventing rat infestations and keeping your home rodent-free.
Sounds good.
We'll also share some surprising facts about rats that you might not know,
Okay.
leaving you with a newfound appreciation for these often maligned creatures.
Stay tuned for more rodent-related revelations.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've journeyed through the unsettling realities of rat infestations, their sneaky behaviors and the health risks they pose. But before you swear off ever eating peanut butter again,
Right.
let's shift our focus to something a bit more empowering: prevention.
Yeah, knowledge is power, and when it comes to rats, the more you know about how to keep them out, the better equipped you'll be to protect your home and your family.
So consider this our masterclass in Rat Prevention 101. We've already covered a lot of ground, but let's recap some of the key takeaways and add a few more tricks to your rodent-repelling toolbox.
Excellent idea. Remember, it all starts with understanding your adversary. We've talked about rats' incredible adaptability, their sharp senses, and their knack for finding even the tiniest vulnerabilities in our homes.
It's like they have a sixth sense for spotting gaps and cracks.
Yeah,
So knowing that, our first line of defense is to seal up those entry points like our lives depend on it.
precisely. And remember, we're not just talking about obvious holes or gaps. Think about areas where pipes and wires enter your home vents, even gaps around windows and doors. Those seemingly insignificant spaces can be like grand entryways for a determined rat.
So it's time to channel your inner handyman and get to work sealing up those weak shots: steel wool, caulk, wire mesh, whatever it takes to create an impenetrable barrier.
And don't forget about those overhanging branches and vines. Rats are expert climbers, so trim back any vegetation that might be giving them easy access to your roof or upper levels.
It's like cutting off their aerial assault route. We're taking away their high ground advantage.
Exactly. Now, once you've secured the perimeter, let's shift our attention to the interior. Remember, rats are always on the lookout for food and water sources, so our goal is to make our homes as unappealing to them as possible.
So we're essentially playing a game of starve the rat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Depriving them of the essentials they need to survive.
Precisely. And this is where good sanitation practices become crucial. We're talking about wiping down counters, sweeping floors, storing food in airtight containers, and securing your garbage. Basically anything you can do to eliminate crumbs, spills, and easily accessible food sources.
It's amazing how resourceful these little guys are.
I know, right?
They can survive on scraps and crumbs that we wouldn't even consider food.
That's why it's so important to be meticulous. Even a few crumbs left on the floor can be a feast for a hungry rat.
Yeah?
And don't forget about pet food. Store it in airtight containers and avoid leaving bowls of food or water out overnight.
Right, we don't want to inadvertently create a rodent buffet in our kitchen.
Now let's talk about clutter.
Okay.
I know, it's not the most fun topic,
Right.
but clutter is a rat's best friend
Why is that?
because it provides hiding places and makes it more difficult to spot them.
Right.
Plus, clutter often accumulates dust and debris, which can attract insects, and those insects can become a food source for rats.
So it's like a domino effect.
Yeah,
Clutter attracts insects, insects attract rats, and before you know it, you've got a full-blown infestation on your hands.
exactly. So if you're serious about rat prevention, decluttering is essential. Go through those closets, clear out those storage spaces, and get rid of anything you don't need or use. The less clutter you have, the less inviting your home will be to rats.
It's not just about preventing rats. It's about creating a more peaceful and organized living space.
Right,
A win-win in my book.
absolutely. Now let's move on to some more unconventional prevention methods.
Okay?
Remember those natural repellents we talked about?
Yeah.
Peppermint oil, cloves, cayenne pepper. Well, there's another surprising scent that rats seem to dislike. Dryer sheets.
Dryer sheets, really?
Yep, as in the ones we use for laundry.
Wow.
The theory is that the strong scent of dryer sheets masks the rats' own scent trails, making it harder for them to navigate and find their way around.
Huh, that's fascinating. So I can just toss a few dryer sheets under the sink, in the pantry, or wherever I suspect rat activity.
It's worth a try. It's a cheap and easy solution, and some people swear by it. You can also try sprinkling dried mint leaves or bay leaves around, as those scents are also said to deter rats.
So we're basically creating a sensory overload for these little guys, bombarding them with scents they find offensive. I like it. It's like a passive-aggressive approach to pest control.
Exactly. Now let's shift our attention to the exterior of your home. Remember, rats don't just magically appear inside our houses. They often start their journey in our yards and gardens.
So it's about creating an unwelcoming environment outside as well as inside.
Right, and the same principles apply. Eliminate food sources, reduce clutter, and make it difficult for rats to find shelter.
So what are some key landscaping tips to keep these furry little landscapers at bay?
First and foremost, keep your yard tidy, rake up those leaves, trim those hedges, and remove any piles of wood or debris. Rats love to burrow and nest in clutter, so the cleaner and more open your yard is, the less appealing it will be to them.
Makes sense. What about bird feeders? Those seem like they'd be a magnet for rats.
They can be, especially if they're not properly maintained. If you have bird feeders, make sure they're elevated and squirrel-proof, and clean up any spilled seed regularly to avoid creating a rodent buffet on the ground.
Right, we want the birds to enjoy their feast, but we don't want it to inadvertently invite a rat invasion.
And speaking of invitations, let's talk about garbage. Make sure your garbage cans have tight-fitting lids and are stored away from your house. Rats are expert dumpster divers, so don't make it easy for them to access your trash.
It's like we're putting up a no vacancy sign for rodents.
Exactly. And if you have a compost bin, be sure to turn it regularly and avoid adding any meat or dairy products, as those can attract rats. Composting is great for the environment, but you don't want to create a rodent breeding ground in your backyard.
So it's all about being mindful of what we're attracting to our yards and taking steps to make our outdoor spaces less hospitable to rats.
Right. And remember, even if you do everything right, there's always a chance that a determined rat might find its way onto your property.
Right.
But by implementing these preventive measures, you'll significantly reduce the likelihood of an infestation.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about preventing rat infestations. We've delved into the nitty-gritty of sealing entry points, eliminating food sources, and using natural repellents.
Right.
We've explored the importance of sanitation, decluttering, and maintaining a tidy yard, and we've emphasized the value of professional extermination for those situations where DIY methods just aren't enough.
Yeah.
So, armed with this knowledge, you're well on your way to creating a rat-free zone in your home and yard.
Remember, vigilance is key. Be proactive, stay informed, and don't hesitate to seek professional help if you need it.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of rats, be sure to follow us for more fascinating explorations. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform, and don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment.
And for more expert advice on pest control, be sure to follow Simple Pest Management on social media. They've got a wealth of information to help you keep those pesky critters at bay.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and may your homes be forever rat-free.